Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Let's start with our fourth session, due diligence. Due diligence is said to be the make or break stage of fundraising, and it requires a thorough understanding of the subject. To help the founders in understanding the process of due diligence and to talk on investors' point of view while performing due diligence, I would like to invite Ms. Sujata Krishnan. Sujata Krishnan manages the fintech investments at Arali Ventures, which is a seed fund invest at an early stage and helps build the venture with promoter teams. Arali Ventures is a Bangalore-based venture fund investing in seed to pre-series A round. They believe that cutting-edge solution for enterprises globally can be built from India and also believes in bringing tech innovation to the SME, MSME businesses. Typically, they invest in India, Southeast Asia. Rally Venture sees it as a great opportunity and actively look at them. They are sector agnostic with a portfolio of 9 startups. Sujata ma'am manages the finances and compliance of the fund. She also coordinates due diligence and deal closure activities for the fund and as a part of post-investment support, oversees finance and compliance at portfolio companies. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Manishri. Hello, everyone. I'm sure these sessions that are being conducted by Arthayan are very useful to all of you in getting an overview of the fundraising process. So I'm here to talk about uh, one of the generally overlooked and what is generally considered as a painful part of the overall fundraising process, which is due diligence. um, I will start. I've put together a deck that is based on my experiences having coordinated with startups and due diligence firms on the due diligence process, and it the aim of this presentation is to give you a general overview of what the process entails, and also to help you prepare for it, and generally know what to expect during the process. Yeah, it's a vast this firms generally look at due diligence firms that are engaged to conduct the exercise, look at many compliances and other business related aspects. So I'm just covering a few of the important areas. But I'm trying to include as many practical perspectives which will help you you know go through this entire step of the fundraising process in a much more smoother fashion. So yeah, I'll just get started. Manishri, I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, ma'am.
Sure. So yeah, so I think the past few sessions would have given you a good idea of the various steps in the fundraising process. Um, Generally, yeah, in the sense, once you decide to undertake a fundraise, you'll put together a pitch deck, and you'll meet with various investors. And these investors, then will conduct a screening the process where they'll try to understand a bit more about your solution. And if they are convinced, they will take it to their investment committee, which then will give a provisional go ahead to make the investment. And that is a stage, make the investment in the sense, evaluate the investment. And that stage is when the term sheet will be given. So once the term sheet is given is when the due diligence process starts. And this will typically involve external consultants. It will involve extensive review of your documents, and as a result, it generally, you need to factor for delays during this process. It all depends upon your internal preparedness, and so delays are a given in most cases. So yeah, and whatever is the outcome of the due diligence process, it informs your definitive documents, that is your shareholder agreement, your share subscription agreements, will incorporate inputs from the due diligence process. And that is the reason why it is very important. There are certain cases where due diligence can also lead to an investment being called off, where the fund may decide not to go ahead with the investment. So it is a critical process, critical step of the entire fundraising process. Um, and it is important for all startups to take this step extremely seriously. Um, so, as I said, there is a screening process already that is conducted before the term sheet is given. So, one would think, what is the difference between screening and due diligence? So, mm, screening is where, where you have pitched to the VC fund. Maybe you have spoken to analyst level folks, and then partners also get involved. So see, they see some interest in your express interest in your venture, and they see some potential in the solution. But how do they go about developing a conviction to make an investment that this solution is investment worthy? And that is what the screening process is. So obviously, and here we are talking about very early stage companies, where some of which may be in pre-revenue stage or at POC stage. So what obviously at that stage there is not much to review in terms of is very early traction. So how do they build the conviction? The team is extremely important at this stage, because the team is responsible for carrying through the solution from concept stage to scaling it up. So a lot depends on the team, and therefore in the screening process, a lot of importance is given to understanding more about the founder and the key team members. So there are background checks that are conducted. There are references taken, and calls are generally made to understand more about the founders. Ex-employers are spoken to. So those kind of checks are done. Founder mindset as well is an important output. Are founders resilient enough? Are they adaptable? So do they have what it takes? Because as we know, running a startup is not a cakewalk. So do you have the mental strength to stick to the process, at the same time have the agility and the adaptability to understand which things work, which don't work? So as a result of that, founder mindset is extremely important. Whether as the venture scales, would the founder be able to deal with larger teams? Would they be able to delegate? Would they also, in certain cases, be able to step back and hand over the reins to someone else? So these are really very important aspects that are considered, during the screening step. Again, how cohesive is the team? Have they known each other for long? So these are these are the team related aspects that are looked into. Obviously, also business review is done. What is the current solution? Does it really address the problem that it is seeking to solve? What is the industry outlook? Is this industry poised for disruption? Is it going to grow? What are the likely growth rates of the industry? And what's the addressable market? And what share of that addressable market this venture can possibly capture? So those kind of inputs are also considered. Industry experts are spoken to, and there are discussions that are held in terms of is the industry, what are the prospects of the industry? Customer calls. So if you have early customers or pilots have been conducted, customer calls are also made to understand how their experience has been. What are any shortcomings that they would need to they would want to highlight? What is the stickiness of the solution? So these are main aspects that are considered during the screening process. and based on this, the investors gain comfort to give a term sheet to the startup. Now, how is it different from due diligence? So, due diligence is more of a formal investigation. In the sense, it's almost like an audit, and it is the primary aim of due diligence is to assess the risks that are involved in investing in that particular startup, and to also confirm a lot of the details that have been provided by the startup. And how is this facilitated? Generally, the term sheet will have a non-disclosure clause. So this kind gives the VC fund to appoint external consultants, either a CA firm or a law firm, to and obtain documents and detailed information from the startup. So this non-disclosure and confidentiality clause gives the comfort that the startup needs to share confidential and sensitive data to the fund and its consultants. So that is the reason due diligence that's how due diligence is different from screening. And as I said, there will be a detailed review of all the documents and filings made by the startup. Contractual and regulatory aspects will be looked into. And why it is important for VC funds? You would think that screening is fairly done. If the screening process has been fairly detailed, then why would they want to conduct a due diligence? So VC funds manage other people's money at the end of the day, right? So they have a fiduciary responsibility towards their investors, that they are making prudent investment decisions. That in fact, even in regulatory filings, the venture capital fund has to state that it has conducted a due diligence before undertaking an investment. So it is a mix of both regulatory requirements and trying to gain a good sense of the risks involved in a particular investment, and also establish confidence on the claims made by the startup before making the investment. And that is the reason why this due diligence step is extremely important. Moreover, it involves external consultants. So the due diligence, the VC fund will appoint a CA. Typically, in the due diligence process, there's more emphasis on the financial and legal aspects. So typically, a CA firm and a law firm will be appointed to look into these aspects. So the startup would need to coordinate with these external consultants, provide them the necessary information to carry out this step. In terms of the areas that are covered, so as I said, legal due diligence, where all legal and regulatory aspects of the business are looked into. There is a financial and tax due diligence where a CA firm will look into, will not only go through your financial statements, but also your various tax filings. In certain cases, there may be a more in-depth business due diligence. Generally, during the screening process, most funds will focus on business aspects. So, but in terms of getting clarity or verifying some of the claims, a business due diligence may also be conducted. Technical due diligence, especially when it is a tech-heavy product or involves tech IP, then a technical due diligence may also come into play. There are some funds who may have ESG requirements, or they may be impact funds, so they may do an environmental due diligence or an impact due diligence. So these are typically the areas that are covered during the due diligence process. So as I said, during the formal due diligence, most of the time is spent on financial and legal due diligence. So in financial due diligence, what is the purpose of doing a financial due diligence? Main purpose of financial due diligence is to assess the financial health of the company, and to verify claims in terms of revenue or any traction that has been made by the startup. Also, to assess the risks that are involved as a result of the transactions entered into by the startup. And obviously, taxes, in terms of whether taxes have been, all the statutory requirements have been met, taxes have been tax returns have been filed, what are the positions that have been adopted while filing the tax returns. So, verifying that as well. So, in a financial due diligence, the CA firm would typically be involved, and you would be required to say provide your audited and unaudited financial statements, your business projections, your financial projections, and there things that will be looked into would be the quality of your revenue. What is the nature of your revenue? Is it recurring in nature or is it one time in nature? Are there long-standing customer contracts in place? What is the concentration of the revenue? Is it that most of the revenue is contributed by by just one or two customers? What is the split between domestic and revenues and export revenues? And in terms of cash flows, like what is the cash conversion cycle? Like what is aging of accounts receivable and payables in terms of are your customers paying on time? So what is the cash flow position? What financial ratios in terms of again in terms if the startup has incurred any borrowing, what is the debt equity ratio? Costs are also looked into. How many employees are there? What are the kind of costs that are being incurred? Borrowings, if any loans have been taken, what is the quantum of the loans? What is the kind of interest that is paid? In terms of your profits, what is the kind of interest coverage? And contingent liabilities, especially if there are any disputes or claims, or if any guarantees have been provided, what could be the impact of those on the financial health of the company? So, a lot of details are looked into. Typically, the firm will provide a checklist which will, list down all the data that they will examine, and a startup would be required to provide all this information. Taxes, as I said, the income tax filings, TDS returns, GST returns, professional tax filings, if again even the provident fund gratuity, where the provisions have been made, ESIC payments, again if there have been any assessments, or there is any litigation pending with the tax department, what could be the likely impact of these litigation. So these are the aspects that are generally looked into during the financial part of the due diligence process. Legal due diligence, again, generally there will be a law firm that will be engaged to conduct the legal due diligence. So, legal due diligence actually covers a number of areas. Obviously, if you're a company, then corporate law, your incorporation documents, your MOA, AOA will be looked into, the composition of your board of directors, whether all the filings have been made in terms of the appointment of these directors, minutes of meetings. If you have taken money from abroad, then whether you've made the appropriate filings with RBI. That is, if there have been any loans that you have taken. Similarly, there are a lot of registers, records that need to be maintained. There are filings that need to be made with the Ministry of Corporate Affairs in terms of minutes of meetings, resolutions that have been passed. So, have you been diligent in making all of those filings? That is looked into. Contracts are looked into. Just to examine your key contracts are examined. to see whether there are any one-sided or any onerous clauses in the contracts. In certain contracts, there may be no cap on liabilities. So, for example, if there were a dispute later, um, uh, the claims that could be made can be very onerous and can affect the company in a very adverse manner. So are there such are these contracts stamped? Are they because stamping is necessary if a contract for a contract to be accepted as evidence. So are important contracts, have they been stamped? Employment contracts, whether they have been entered into, whether there are key clauses in the employment agreements, like non-compete or exclusivity. So those which ensure that the employee only works for your company. IP assignment is included. So if the employee develops any IP, then it is assigned to the company. Whether those kind of clauses are included. ESOP, if there have been any ESOP grants, or if employment contracts or your annual letters to employees cover any grant of ESOPs, so that is covered. Similarly, in consultancy agreements as well, whether assignment of IP is included, license, royalty agreements, what are the terms? Sometimes even if you're using some technology, how are you using the technology? Is that also governed by a contract? So that's also looked into. Labor laws is complete. Like there are in India, there are plethora of labor laws that are applicable to companies, and these could start with as companies, like as soon as incorporation. Some regulations kick in when you reach an employee strength of 5, some 10, some 20. So you need to be aware of that as well. So there aspects like your provident fund returns, ESIC registration and payment challans, wages register, whether you're giving pay slips to your employees, that is also looked into, because that is a requirement under Minimum Wages Act. Your gratuity records, whether you have shops and establishment registration. If you have more than 10 employees, you need to have a maternity policy in place. So whether you have that policy in place. Similarly, the prevention of sexual harassment, whether you have the necessary framework required under those laws, whether you have a council to deal with these kind of issues. And then there are industry specific laws as well. For example, say you're an e-commerce company, then there are e-commerce laws. There is IT Act. If you're collecting, information, customer information, then there are personal data law rules that you need to that you're governed by. Intellectual property, again, IP assignment, what patents you have filed, trademarks that you have filed, domain registration, the domain registration of your website and whose name it is. All of these aspects are looked into, in the course of a legal due diligence. So, as you know, you will get a sense of how comprehensive this process can be, how exhaustive, and how honestly painstaking process this is. So yeah, it pays, it really helps if you kind of plan for it proactively, and I will cover a few of these aspects in terms of preparation in the coming slides. Business and technical due diligence, I don't want to spend too much time, because, as I said, in the screening process, this will be covered. And anyway, as startup founders, you will intimately know your business. You would know, the answers to most of the questions that come up during the business and technical due diligence. Technical due diligence is more even in companies that don't have a tech solution per se, it does have, there are certain aspects of technical due diligence that are involved. But as I said, I would say that founders are quite well placed to deal with the requirements of business and technical due diligence. So I will kind of skip this slide and move to the next slide. So, in terms of, as I said, how do you plan and prepare for this entire process, right? Frankly, I would say the minute you start thinking about raising funds, you need to actively start preparing for due diligence. And this, proactive preparation will really help, the process. Due diligence, unfortunately, can lead to a lot of delays depending on whatever findings are there as part of the process. And so, if and some of these actually are not that difficult to deal with if they are addressed in a timely manner. So that's the reason why it pays to kind of be well prepared for this step. So, um, so one founder you would need to kind of identify who would need to own this process. It really helps to have one single point of contact within the startup to prepare and deal with the various stakeholders during the process. Founders need to align on responses to key questions. As I said, the business due diligence, and even in order to clarify certain questions that come up during financial due diligence or legal due diligence, questions may be asked of founders, and so it's important that they know what are the specifics. And especially when it comes to business aspects and how to respond to these questions. You need to set expectations with your accounting and secretarial firm, because at an early stage you wouldn't have any internal capabilities to deal with most of the questions that are posed by the due diligence firm. So you need to set expectations, work early with your accounting and secretarial firm, bring them on board, and let them know that you are going to start the formal fundraise process. And they would need to get engaged, if at all a due diligence happens, get engaged with the external consultants and provide them with the necessary information. So taking them into confidence is really very important when it comes to preparation. And So once you have them into confidence, it's a good idea to set up the data room. And yeah, when people listen to the term data room for the first time, they really don't know what is being referred to. Frankly, it is nothing but a shared drive, share folder, which is organized in a certain fashion to in a systematic fashion, where you can upload or start uploading all your key documents, and keep it ready. So for example, your incorporation documents, if you have issued any shares, then all the filings that have been made with respect to that, your corporate law filings with MCA, your tax returns, your GST returns, TDS returns. So all of that, proactively, start collecting those documents and start putting them up in a folder. That would really help, reduce the pain, later on. And it's all, as I said, if you've already, ask your accounting and secretarial firm, to think proactively about other documents that may be required. If possible, identify any gaps in your documentation and start fixing them. So, you know, you will end up saving a lot of time if you do this. And during the actual process, in terms of planning, I think the founder, whoever is been identified to own the process, would need to kind of set aside at least 2 to 3 hours on a daily basis for 3 to 4 weeks. So the formal process can actually last 3 to 4 weeks, because there is a lot of to and fro interim reports of findings that may be filed, and um, some questions that may come up. So a lot of coordination is required. So mentally, the founder should be prepared to set aside 2 to 3 hours on a daily basis for almost 3 to 4 weeks, you know, dedicated to the due diligence. So say you have received a term sheet and you know that the due diligence is going to commence. So what do you do before commencement of the due diligence process? One is you need to have a call with the fund to discuss what are the focus areas for due diligence. So are they only going to do a financial and legal DD, or are there other areas as well that they are going to examine? So getting a sense of what areas are going to be looked into in detail will help you plan for the process. Um, and also get introduced to the external due diligence firms who are going to be engaged. Identify who are your contacts within your firms. Reach out to them and introduce yourself. So that helps kind of things later on. Ask for a preliminary checklist. And go through it and clear your doubts on some of the asks. Some of these may be very technical. As I said, you will have to kind of engage your accounting and secretarial firms, and work with them to understand whether you have everything in place, whether there is any gap in understanding in terms of requirements. Go back to those external firms that are conducting the due diligence, understand what really is required. So it's important to do that. Understand what the timelines are, like in terms of how long would this process take. What are the key targets? Are there any interim targets in terms of filing an initial report with findings? So get a sense of how long it will take. Establish a process for providing information and resolving queries. So in terms of either a daily call or a call every other day. If not calls, then depending on what is the comfort level with the external consultants and your own advisors, that is your CA firm, try and ensure that there is a clear process to provide information and resolve any queries. Mm, and once the due diligence starts and you have received the checklist, it will be good to kind of the share drive where you have put up all the information, just align it to the structure of the checklist. It will help the firms that are engaged in the process get the information easily. And obviously, it will help the process move along smoothly. So please do that. Put together any missing data that you have. As I said, have regular touch points, set up some sort of cadence with the DD firm and your consultants to get together and resolve any queries that come up. um, Ensure that your consultants are addressing issues quickly. Understand from them what are the complexities involved, what is because issues will come up, there will be gaps that will be identified as part of the process. If you fix them proactively before the final report is issued, then it will save you a lot of trouble, because it will obviously have an impact on your deal closure timelines. So if you can um, preempt some of this by resolving some of these issues during the process itself, then it will save you time. So please do that. There will be some unresolved issues where either your firm, that is your CA firm, and the external, the DD firm, have maybe differing viewpoints in terms of how to resolve this. There, I think, as the startup founder, it would be good for you to reach out to the VC fund and understand from them how important this issue is to the fund, and how best you can address it to their satisfaction. So in certain cases, uh, for example, the DD fund, firm may say that these things have to be closed before the agreement is signed. But maybe you can kind of speak to the VC fund and explain to them the complexities involved, and give them an assurance in terms of whether it can be fixed, even and give them timelines in terms of by when you will be able to fix it, and maybe move work with them to move it to post signing of the agreement. So there will be some such issues that will come up where you will need to take the fund into confidence. Obviously, the fund will have its own lens, through which they will look at these issues. They will assess the relative risks involved in your proposal, and it's possible that in certain cases they may agree to it. So, yeah, it is important to work with the fund as well closely, to understand, how to deal with the issues that come up during the due diligence process. And there will be delays, in the sense, like as I said initially, before commencement they may tell you that we will complete this in 3 weeks, but depending on what kind of issues come up, and also in terms of how quickly you are able to kind of provide clarifications, you are able to provide the necessary data, all these will have an impact on the timelines, and for most startup founders who are focused on running the business, and that's the reason I said it's important that one founder is, he owns this process. It is very a lot of there is a tendency to kind of think of this due diligence process as a nuisance and as non-essential, but it is not. And To give it the due importance and to address the issues quickly will really kind of smoothen your entire fundraise. So at the same time, the information requirements will be a little overwhelming. When you look at the checklist, some of them will run into pages, and you might get overwhelmed in terms of the kind of data, the granularity of the data that is being asked for. But at the end of the day, these data requirements are being asked for a specific reason. Either they are important, from a risk perspective, or there are certain regulatory, legal requirements. At the end of the day, you're running the company within the legal framework of Indian rules and regulations, and you are required to meet those rules and regulations, right? So there is no wishing it away. And so it might seem like a very draining process, but I would suggest that just stick to it and try work with all the stakeholders proactively, and try to kind of minimize delays. Yeah. And what can be the impact of the due diligence? So at the once the due diligence process ends, there will be a final report that will be given by that firm to the fund, which lays down all the findings and their suggestions in terms of how to deal with whatever lapses have been found as part of the process. So as I said, the direct outcomes will definitely impact your deal timelines. So, for example, if some of the lapses are such where certain transactions have to be unwound, um, and certain filings have to be made, and if these are like conditions that need to be fulfilled before signing of the agreement, obviously the signing will get delayed. um, Similarly, there may be specific indemnities that may be asked of you. So for example, if you have taken money from, you have accepted funding from someone outside India, and there is a requirement to say file a foreign liability assets and assets return, something which most early stage companies may not be aware of. And there are certain penalties associated with non-filing of those returns. So there will be an indemnity there in terms of you need to kind of file that return. You may have collected TDS and not deposited it. So indemnities in terms of protecting the fund from any fallout of these kind of lapses. So that's what an indemnity in a sense protects the fund from any adverse outcomes because of these once they have invested into the company, and if these issues later crop up, then if they are covered by the indemnities or the representations and warranties, it gives the fund some protection in terms of any outcomes of these lapses. At the end of the day, nobody really wants to kind of um, be subject, or rely on these indemnities and warranties. And that's the reason, if the issue is important enough, most funds will expect you to regularize the issue before they sign the agreement. And that's the reason I said it has a direct outcome on your deal timelines. So that's what I said, the pre and post closing conditions. Before signing, what are the steps that need to be done, issues that need to be addressed post closing. Again, there will be certain timelines that will be there in the agreement in terms of within 6 months. Say you need to, for example, appoint an auditor of repute to audit your financials, or you need to kind of obtain. Provide for in a lot of cases you may not have provided for gratuity, so provide for gratuity, get an actuarial valuation done. So many such conditions are there. So there will be post closing conditions as well, which you need to kind of agree to, and there will be specific timelines by which you need to complete the those conditions. And it's only in certain cases that post closing that the money will be wired. In certain cases, it depends on the timelines that are laid down in the agreement in terms of how long they give you to kind of meet all of these conditions. Consent rights. So, in certain cases, funds will have consent rights where they will have the right to examine, any decisions that you take. And they'll have veto rights where you can't go ahead with certain decisions without their consent. So entering into an agreement, entering into an expense beyond a certain threshold, or entering into any loan agreement. So it all, as I said, the due diligence step will set the tone of a lot of these aspects, and it will have a direct impact in terms of what is included in your definitive documents. What are the secondary outcomes? The trust level. So, for example, if there are significant gaps between the claims that were made, during the screening and versus the findings of the due diligence, obviously, trust levels get impacted. In certain cases, as I said, the deal may be called off. In certain cases, yes, even if the deal goes through, there will be some impact in terms of these gaps on your relationship with the fund. It's also a comment on your organizational capabilities in terms of how quickly you are able to resolve issues to the satisfaction of everyone involved. In case of contentious issues, how you were able to arrive at middle path. So those and again, how proactively you were, your accounting and secretarial support, how were able to address the queries. So it is a comment on your organizational capabilities, and so yeah, it kind of determines the level of confidence that the fund will have, in your startup. Obviously, business plans, there will be some impact on the business plans. Business plans are also included in agreements. So, how the business plan is drawn up, what assumptions to be taken into. So those will be impacted. There again, during reviews, the regular reviews that the fund will have post the investment. What is the emphasis? What aspects are looked into, those will be informed by the due diligence process, and there will be an overhang on future fundraisers because in certain cases some of these issues may not be able to resolve. You may have provided indemnities to the seed stage fund, for example, but you go for a series A fundraise or a series B fundraise, the bigger funds may have a very different perspective on some of these, not necessarily, but each fund has its own take on some of these matters, and as a result of some of these unresolved issues, mistakes that were made early on which cannot really be rectified, those will have like an impact on your future fundraisers. So in terms of the kind of funds that look at you, how you know how it impacts future yeah, the how it impacts the kind of fundraising that you can do, this the pace of the fundraise, all of these it will impact. So it's not just that you're done with this round and uh, it goes away. It will impact your future fundraisers as well. So that's the reason it is important to kind of address some of these issues and be prepared. Some of the common issues that we have seen in our experience and an early stage especially. So you're starting up and you get some informal funding from friends and family. If you're structured as a company, that is a big no-no. It will, and especially if you don't have any agreements in place, then either a shareholders agreement or a loan agreement. Even for loans, there are specific conditions that need to be for example, a company cannot take informal fund means loan from a person who's not a director or a shareholder. So in those cases, it becomes a deposit, and there are specific requirements for accepting deposits. These are practical cases that we have seen where the entire closing has been delayed by almost 2 months because we've had to fix these issues, give the money back, do all the regulatory filings, file some fines, pay penalties. So, this is something. So, before accepting money from someone, please, I would suggest that you consult with a CA firm or a lawyer, and have whatever documentation that is needed in place. So please do that. Again, on share transfers, share certificates. Sometimes the founder may co-opt a co-founder, may have transferred his shares. Share certificates may not be stamped. The share transfer forms are not in place. So all of these issues are there in terms of accepting funds from others. Deposit of taxes. In an early stage company, you may be strapped for cash. So you may have deducted tax from payments made to vendors, but you may not have deposited it. That is a big no-no. And you may be cash strapped, but please first pay the taxes and then you can incur your other expenses. It's extremely important to get this right. Similarly, GST returns. A lot of cases where so small practical things can help. For example, uh, there are you may, for example, if you raise your invoice in the beginning of the month, you may actually get leeway till 20th of next month to pay up your invoice. That may help manage your cash cycle. If you raise the invoice on towards the end of the month, you have to deposit the GST by 20th of next month. So you, in effect, it's between getting a 20-day window and a 50-day window. So small practical steps actually help. But as I said, if you have collected any taxes, then please ensure that those taxes are deposited on time. Cash transactions. So again, at an early stage, there may be cash transactions. Lots of issues there as well in terms of accepting cash beyond a certain threshold. You may not be able to get a tax deduction for those expenses. So accounting issues, your accounting may not have been done properly. The revenues may not be booked properly. You may have capitalized certain costs but not have the appropriate supporting for capitalization of those costs, especially in IP led companies where you are building IP. You will because the costs are being incurred towards building the IP, you need to kind of capitalize those costs, but there are certain conditions there as well. So please again, and if you have already kind of started expensing of some of these costs for development of IP, then at a later stage capitalizing it may become a problem. So be mindful of these things. Employment agreements, as I said, IP assignments. So in employment agreements, sometimes IP assignment clauses may not be there. So you may not, like for example, if the employee has developed an IP that's being used by you, whether you have a right to use it, whether you have a right to own, whether you own it, who owns the IP. So those things come into question. So it's important to have tight employment agreements in place. Similarly, non-solicit, confidentiality. These kind of clauses should be part of the employment agreement. Your corporate filings and records, as I said, for every board meeting that you have, for every shareholders meeting that you have, there are certain filings that need to be made. There are certain registers that need to be maintained, minute books that need to be maintained. Some of these are easy fixes, but some of them are not, because there are certain timelines associated with these filings. So be aware of that. Agreements with key customers, vendors, what kind of this time, like for example, what is the window given for making payments? Then by when do you contractors again have they assigned the IP if they have developed anything. Similarly, whether there are one-sided terms in the agreements, like where the customer can terminate the contract, but you do not have the right to terminate the contract. Customer can terminate the contract without notice. So be aware of what you are getting into. So important. Similarly, data security, privacy. How are you dealing with the data? Do you have proper privacy rules in place? If you have a website, do you have a grievance officer named on the website? What is your policy? If you're an e-commerce company, what is your policy in terms of returns? Things like that. So these are some of the common issues that we have seen. Some of the general pointers to get this right. I would say, like I said, that you start preparing for the due diligence from the day that you decide to fundraise. But actually, I would go one step ahead and say it is better to get it right from day one. The day you start the business, compliance should be ingrained in the culture of the company. A lot of companies view compliance as non-essential, a drag on their time and resources. This can be really very detrimental to the health of the company, because as I said, there are these rules that are in place. We are operating within certain framework of these rules, and it is important to abide by them. There is no choice, really speaking, in this matter. So it is really important to focus on compliance from day one, because it will cut your funding. In practical terms, it will cut your funding timelines by almost 2 months. Best case, I'm saying, like at the very least, if you kind of focus on these things from day one. And as I said, there is a bigger impact on future funding cycles and exit. As I said, there is we know of a practical case where a founder, like in the initial stages of the company, did not, there was a lapse in filing GST. Later, when the company had scaled up, and there was an acquisition that was on the cards, rather than the acquirer said that just because of this lapse that was done, like maybe 4 or 5 years back, they could not do a share purchase, but instead had a transaction was structured as a asset sale. And because of that, one, the valuations were impacted, and second, even the from a tax perspective, it was not conducive to the founder, because the founder did not get the benefit of lower rates on capital gains taxes, had to end up paying business reported as business income. So these kind of as I don't view it as non-essential. Please don't view it as a nuisance, as a drag on your resources. give it the right kind of importance, right kind of respect, and things will really be smooth. And it is important to do this from day one. Ensure that it is part of your culture. More another really important thing is engage a good accounting firm and a secretarial firm, preferably the same firm. Establish a good rapport with them, share data with them proactively, as in when you embark on any new aspect of business, whether it is, say, you're started doing exports, you are servicing a foreign customer, say you're going to accept a loan, say you are going to do a big asset purchase or a leasing agreement, whatever, or you have hired employees, like, suddenly you have scaled up from, say, a 10-member team to a 20-member team. As it is, on a monthly basis, you are supposed to share information with them, but before even doing some of these things, have the kind of relationship where you can reach out to them and take their advice on how to kind of set these things up. It will really save a lot of time and costs for you. So please do that. Find out in your circles who are the respected, accounting firms who have dealt with startups and who know what, scaling a startup involves. So please ensure that you have the right kind of support. Some of these things like employment agreements, vendor contracts, and all, it helps to spend time proactively on finalizing these templates upfront, having templates for all of these in place, so that, and getting it reviewed by a lawyer so that the key aspects are included. So that helps. Be mindful of compliance timelines and thresholds. As I said, ask these firms to provide you a calendar of all the compliances. I'm not, and thresholds. As I said, when you're a 5-member company, the kind of compliances that apply are very different than when you are a 20-member company. For example, you need to pay gratuity if you have more than 10 employees. But if you have more than 20 employees, you need to also start paying provident fund. So a lot of these things are there, that you need to kind of be mindful of. I'm not saying that you need to know all of this in detail. The best thing would be, as I said, to engage good advisors, keep them updated on developments, and keep, just flagging off anything that seems like uh, different to them, and get their inputs. So it's really important to do that. And your firms may be doing their jobs, but once in a while, do get involved, do get a sense of these things. But when the due diligence process starts, even getting having some sense of these things, what it means, what it entails, will not only help you not get overwhelmed by the information overload, but also, obviously, in the sense, familiarity with some of these things will help you solve issues also more easily. So get a basic understanding. I'm not saying very in-depth understanding, but do get a basic understanding of some of these issues. Yeah. So but first and foremost, please don't view compliance as non-essential. That is something that we have seen, a difference between a smooth fundraising process and a onerous one is just that mindset. The companies who got it right early on really, will see will reap the benefits of investing in some of these things very early on. So yeah, so I think this is all that I plan to cover. I hope this session gave you a good overview in terms of what the due diligence process entails. But more than anything else, you know, helped all of you get a sense of what to expect and how to be prepared for this type of the fundraise process. Yeah, that's it from me.